What's going on, guys? Today I have an Ancient Gear deck profile I prepared for February 2021, sort of post Blazing Vortex. And I built it as competitive as possible with like several iterations of the deck list, going through pretty severe changes from list to list. But this is what I've come up with after a couple months of testing the deck. Again, it's as competitive as possible. I wanted to build it in a sense where it could be like a locals winning deck, or if I went to a regional, if those existed anymore, I could expect to get an invite or place at least a lot better than one would think when they hear I'm taking Ancient Gears to a regional. Do I think the list is a regional winning list? No. Ancient Gears it's very hard to bring the deck to like its ceiling with the cards the archetype has now, but I have taken it to several locals, and I've even placed first a couple times, playing against decks like Zoo Eldritch. We have Drytrons at our locals as well. I don't remember if I played one when I actually got first. I remember playing Zoo Eldritch. I remember playing a Shaddoll. Our locals is usually like 4 to 5 rounds. It's actually a pretty competitive locals with quite a few meta decks. So it's not like, I'm saying I want a 3-round locals or anything. Locals is like our highest form of tournament right now, so this is honestly as best as I could get you guys right now. So I'm going to run through the main deck list and explain it, and then go through side and extra as well. So yeah, let's get into it. So starting off, we have one Ancient Gear Golem. So this is sort of like the main boss monster of the deck, obviously. Definitely one of the most nostalgic cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Personally, one of my favorite cards of all time. I absolutely love Ancient Gear Golem. But what does he do in the deck? So essentially he's the centerpiece of the deck, like the focal point. You want to get him on the field in some scenarios so that your other cards work around him and essentially let the deck do what it's supposed to do at its ceiling. So he is a very integral piece, but he's also, again, Ancient Gear Golem. So he is naturally like a super big brick. You don't really want to open him unless the other parts of your hand are absolutely perfect. So we are going to minimize the amount of copies we're playing at 1. I choose not to play Ultimate Pound either because, again, he is a brick. And like I said, want to build the deck as competitively possible, which means we have to minimize on bricks. So yeah, just 1 Ancient Gear Golem. Next up, 1 Reactor Dragon. So again, this is a card I've minimized due to the fact that when you draw it, it does like absolutely nothing on its own beside have Ancient Gear in its card name, which, I mean, this one doesn't because it's Italian. It actually doesn't say Ancient Gear at all. But I digress. So yes, 1 Reactor Dragon. So this I've seen many lists play multiple copies of, and I kind of understand it, right? Because it actually is summonable off Gear Town, meaning like it is more accessible than Ancient Gear Golem. Which is usually seen being played less than Reactor Dragon, at least in quantities, right? So Reactor Dragon is really good for clearing back row and being essentially a main deck boss monster that can win the game should something go terribly awry. But we're minimizing, again, simply for the fact that it's a brick, and that is why we've cut it down to 1. Next up, 3 Ancient Gear Wyvern. So this is sort of like the best combo piece in our deck. We just want to turbo into this card and get the search off of it. It searches for an Ancient Gear card, which is very, very good for making sure you see the pieces you need to see so that you get your board. So essentially, this deck is hard go second, try to win your first turn going second. That is the deck's main goal. This also has a weird effect where you can't set cards after you use its effect, which you have to be kind of aware of if you need to set certain cards in your deck. If you're not going to win the turn that you're like your first turn playing, like either you went first or you just can't OTK. So yeah, you do have to be aware of that. But 3 Wyvern, we want to maximize on Wyvern because it is the best starter for the deck. Then we have 2 Ancient Gear Frame. This is a starter like Wyvern, however, this is more limited in what it can search. This has to search Ancient Gear Golem or a card that lists Ancient Gear Golem in its card text. However, it discards a card, which is relevant for several cards in the deck, which I'll get to later. The main thing is here it can search Ancient Gear Fusion, and the most important part of that is if Frame searching Ancient Gear Fusion, it means Wyvern can search literally anything else in your deck, cards you need to see to further extend into more combo pieces and more Ancient Gear names. So having Frame be able to search the Fusion is very, very good. Only 2 though, because you don't want to see too many of it. Like, you only need one normal summon, if any. You really don't need a normal summon to even do your full combo. So it just depends on your opening hand, but yeah. And then one box. This, again, is a brick we're minimizing on. Some lists play 2 in case you draw one, but it's not like the most important card. Usually it's just a way to get 2 names in your hand, but it can also tutor into a different engine that we choose to play. But box essentially is just like a free +1 that can get you a second name, and it has Ancient Gear in its name, which is very important, because if you'll notice, we are playing 8 Ancient Gear monsters. This is all the Ancient Gear monsters I choose to play in this list, which if you have seen other lists or have played Ancient Gears yourself, you might be looking at this profile like, why is there only 8? Because I'm not playing any Ancient Gear Hound, and I've played a very minimalistic package of Ancient Gear monsters, because if you want to play this deck competitively, you have to accept this very, very sad fact that the Ancient Gear monsters, they're not great. Like, the best one is Wyvern, but competitively speaking, they're not super powerful cards, which is unfortunate, but essentially they become names, and you just want to use these cards and cards that, you know, extend into these cards to search your main engine to make your end boards and go for game. Hound is an alright card. I have no problem with Ancient Gear Hound. However, I feel like it takes away from what the deck's actually trying to do. The end goal is to fusion summon a big monster and win, but the way you have to extend into Hound or normal summon it means you need to like have either a super weird hand full of Ancient Gear monsters, or you need to use one of your extenders to get Hound out instead of Frame or Wyvern. And it's just not what the deck wants to do, especially because Hound is a level 3, which is very relevant when it comes to Dugaris in the extra deck. But yeah, just 8 Ancient Gear monsters. It has been what's working for me. I've never needed more in all the games I've played with the deck. Even when I'm using materials from my deck with Ancient Gear Fusion, I've never needed more than 8 Ancient Gear monsters. So yeah. Next up, 2 Anchor Drill and 1 Trencher. This is the engine you can tutor with your Ancient Gear box because they have either 500 attack in the case of Trencher or 500 defense in the case of Anchor Drill. The main goal of your first turn when you're going second is to turbo out Ancient Gear Ballista, which is very important because Ballista then goes into other cards you need to extend into. And Anchor Drill is really good at doing that because it is an extender. It can normal summon itself, and you can special summon either Wyvern or Frame. And you get your search off of these, and then you go in Ballista, get another special summon and or another search, which is very, very good. But that's like the floor of the little small package of Infinitrack we're playing here. The ceiling actually comes with a card called Urgent Schedule, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, and now that it's much more easily accessible due to the reprint, much easier to play 3 of it. And this package off of Urgent Schedule is absolutely insane because it's a free Ballista, and then Trencher can banish itself in the graveyard to special summon Anchor Drill, which can again special another Ancient Gear monster from your hand. And you can, like, if you're opening Urgent Schedule and going into your Infinitrack package, your hand is usually like turbo game, so very, very powerful engine. Infinitrack Trencher is a brick, so it's one of like the 4 essentially, like there's 4 or 5 like hard bricks in the deck, but you can actually special Trencher in a lot of different scenarios to where it's not a brick, and Frame can discard a card which comes into play with the Trencher, as well as 1 other card in the deck. But yeah, that's it for the Infinitrack package we choose to play. Next up, 2 Dairy Crane. Again, the goal is to make Ballista as fast as possible to turbo into other cards and use Ballista's effect. Dairy Crane assists in that because if you summon any Earth Machine monster, you can just special summon this card from your hand, and then bam, 2 Earth Machine monsters. However, there's 2 options you can play in this slot. It's Dairy Crane, and then there's the Speed Train, whose name escapes me, but he's 3k and can like special summon himself if you control one. And then it salvages a monster in your end phase. So on paper it seems like completely better than this card, and it's like, why play Dairy Crane? The reason I play Dairy Crane is its ability to chain block. For those unaware, Dairy Crane actually triggers when a Ancient Gear monster is summoned. So if you summon something like Wyvern, you have like 2 simultaneous or like same spell speed effects going off at once. You can set Wyvern is Chainlink 1, Dairy Crane is Chainlink 2, and they can't Ash your Wyvern, which is very cool if like the rest of your hand is loaded, and then you can search something like Fortress and make sure all of your plays are uninterrupted. So yeah, Dairy Crane's ability to chain block is pretty cool for several cards, of course, like Ash Blossom. Then there's things that negate, like Borreload Savage, and you know, all sorts of cards. And Dairy Crane just assists in making sure your plays go off, which is very, very good. And it's the reason I choose to play Dairy Crane instead of the other one. Next up, one of the most important cards in the deck is 3 Gamma, I'll put those over here, and a Driver. So we are playing the Gamma package as our only hand trap, actually, or at least only monster hand trap in the deck. However, I choose not to play it as like a hand trap most of the time. The only deck I choose to play it as a hand trap is usually against Drytron. This card is very, very mandatory in this deck for several reasons. One, it's an engine card, which I'll explain like more when I get to the extra deck. There's several ways to make Gamma an engine card. But also its ability to stop cards like Utopic Zexal, VFD. That's just kind of mandatory this format with VW running around. Virtual World is a very scary matchup because you essentially just lose if VFD resolves. So cards like Gamma are mandatory, but like it's also a board breaking card if you're playing it. Like, again, I don't use it as a hand trap like I said, and I guess to elaborate, I usually use this on my turn. Like if I'm going second, I'll save it till my turn and then use it to like break my opponent's board when they're activating monster effects in response to my cards and effects. As long as I don't control a monster, right? And that's how it becomes more of an engine card. But you're a go second deck, you're mandated to play going second cards, which a lot of Ancient Gear lists online, I've seen a lot of lists that are like full like combo, all engine, and no board break, which you just can't do if you want to play the deck competitively. So you have to run cards like Gamma, which I am maximizing, and it is one of the best cards in the deck by far. That's it for monsters. On to spells. We have 3 Pot of Extravagance. So yeah, even after the release of Blazing Vortex and Pot of Prosperity, I choose to play Extravagance because, of course, Prosperity lets you essentially pick what card you want out of the 6 you see, and you can get very specific combo pieces. Because this deck is hard go second and needs to break its opponent's board as well as combo, the fact that Extravagance gets you 2 cards is actually extremely relevant, because it can get you a combo piece and a board breaker, or 2 board breakers, or 2 combo pieces, right? Sometimes drawing 2 cards is just like mandatory, and the extra deck cost, it can like be detrimental, but most of the time it's not going to be because of the way we built the extra deck. So yeah, I choose to play Extravagance over Pot of Prosperity, but if you want to play Prosperity, you can. It's definitely a viable option. I just feel like Extravagance is going to do more by letting me start with 7 cards going second. So yes, that is why I choose to play Extravagance over Prosperity. Next up, 3 Gear Town. This is pretty self-explanatory. You just want to like pop this card and special summon off of it and extend, right? We're also playing a Terraforming to go with it. But yeah, Gear Town, again, very self-explanatory. However, like a lot of people don't know about the effect where you only need to have like 1 tribute to summon Ancient Gear monsters that require tributes while it's on the field, which I've used several times to summon Ancient Gear Golem for essentially free if I happen to draw it or need to search it because I already drew Fusion and I can go that route, or I just have like a bunch of excess Gear Towns. But yeah, Gear Town, very self-explanatory. I've actually considered cutting it down because there's not as many ways to pop it past like Ballista, so sometimes it's not that great, but you want to play 3 because of your 3 Catapult. And this is one of the most powerful cards in your deck. Definitely one of the most powerful cards in the Ancient Gear archetype when it can resolve. It is Ancient Gear Catapult. So essentially you send 1 face-up spell or trap you control to the graveyard to special summon an Ancient Gear monster from your deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. Which means it specials Ancient Gear Golem, right? But if you tribute Gear Town, you're specialing Ancient Gear Golem off of the Catapult, and you can special something like Wyvern or Frame off of your Gear Town, therefore instantly having Ancient Gear Golem and Ancient Gear Fusion. Which of course is like full combo right there. Like if you draw this 2-card combo, it's like the most powerful 2-card combo in the deck. And then Frame, again, Frame's ability to discard a card to search the card it needs is relevant with this card, because when this card's in the graveyard, you can banish it to destroy a face-up card you control and special summon an Ancient Gear token. which is essentially just an Ancient Gear name to either make Ballista or Fusion. So yeah, you can only use either effect once per turn, but this card is extremely powerful. However, it is also one of the most bricky cards in the deck because it is always part of like a 2-card combo, of which we only have like 5 targets it can hit. However, some of those are searchable, but it doesn't matter because you have to control no monsters. So sometimes I consider cutting this card to 2, but seeing the 2-card combo puts the deck at a different level than not seeing the 2-card combo. It's like a completely different deck when you open Catapult Gear Town and when you don't. But I mean, if you open Urgent Schedule, it's like the same. So you have like essentially multiple ways to see your most powerful combos. 2 Fortress, this card is insane because it's essentially Miscellaneousaurus. Ancient Gear monsters that turn their summon cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. So no Imperm, no Valor, no Torrential Tribute, no Needle Sealing, none of that. It just doesn't work. But most importantly, Ancient Gear cards cannot be responded to. So like if you activate Ancient Gear Fusion and you have this on the field, they can't Ash Blossom it. So that is very, very powerful. Things like Ancient Gear Catapult that seem obscenely weak to Ash Blossom cannot be ashed. So that is just very, very good. And we choose to play 2 of it mostly because it doesn't do much on its own, right? You want to see it with other cards like your Catapult or, you know, other extenders. Another thing to note is that if this is destroyed, you can special summon an Ancient Gear monster from your hand or grave. But then I believe you can only special summon Ancient Gear monsters, that or Earth Machine monsters. Yeah, I think you can only special summon Ancient Gear monsters after you use, it's in Italian, so I can't actually tell you the very specifics. I don't know my own cards, that's terrible. I know there is a summoning restriction. I believe it's Ancient Gear monsters only, which means you can't make Verte Anaconda. But if it's Earth Machines, that's even worse because then you can't make, your main boss monster, but I'm pretty sure it's Ancient Gear monsters. 2, Ancient Gear Fusion. This is like the most integral part of the entire combo, is making sure you see this so you can actually fusion summon. Again, we're not running Ancient Gear Hound, so this is our way to make our cards. And this is just like generically better in my opinion because it's a spell, which means you can extend into, you can use your normal summon all your special summons without special summoning Hound, and then use Ancient Gear Fusion, right? So yes, this essentially just lets us summon our main boss monsters. And then alongside it, we are running 1 Overload Fusion. I'm going to check the camera because I feel like I've been moving my mat around. 1 second, guys. Honestly, that looks good enough to me. Overload Fusion is very, very good because it essentially, like, with Verte Anaconda, this is either a second Chaos Ancient Gear Giant or like your first one in hand where you had to play through a bunch of interrupts. But also if you like draw this and like you can try to break your opponent's board with all your combo pieces, and then you can just play this from your hand after all your extenders and cards have gone to the graveyard, and you can just make Chaos Ancient Gear Giant anyways and sort of win the game from there. But mostly for Verte Anaconda. I don't want to run multiples of this card. There's a lot of lists that play like multiple Overload Fusions and then like Power Bonds for like super sacky plays. That's just not needed. You summon 1 Chaos Ancient Gear Giant, it can be game on its own. You summon 2 with Verte or this. That's more than enough. When Overload Fusion gets belled though, very, very sad. Very sad. Because it's not an Ancient Gear card, it can get interrupted. So that is unfortunate, but off Verte, it's usually pretty safe. 3 Urgent Schedule. This is, again, one of the most powerful cards in the entire deck. Because on its own, it's essentially just as good as Catapult Gear Town, maybe a little less good, but it makes your boards insane. Like cards like Catapult and Gear Town together in Urgent Schedule lead to boards that are like double Chaos Ancient Gear Giant, Dugaris, or like, you know, Verte Giant, Dugaris, and like so many different boards that just look so insane and are almost guaranteed game. It's because of these cards. And this essentially, you just special summon 2 Earth Machine monsters from your deck. One that is level 4 or lower and one that's level 5 or higher, and then only machines can attack for that turn. You go for your Infinitrack engine usually, but you have so many cards that fit the mold. Like all of your Ancient Gear monsters fit either level 4 or lower or level 5 or higher in the case of Reactor Dragon. And then you have Dairy Crane, who's level 5 or higher, so you're going to have targets to resolve the effect even if you draw parts of your Infinitrack lineup. So that's important to note. But yeah, you just want to see this card, so we're maximizing it at 3. And you have to control less monsters than your opponent, which is, again, one of the reasons we're hard to go second, besides the fact that we just want to OTK as fast as possible. And then we run 2 Book of Moon. There are a lot of spells in this list. Book of Moon is, I mean, there's not much to say about it. It is a break your board card. We want to see this going second and mess with their interrupts, so we can like hit Vanity's Ruler. We can bait a negate from Herald of Ultimateness. We can book things like QB or Crocosaur if they choose to leave that on field instead of going VFD for whatever reason, which I've seen some lists tend to do in random scenarios if they think they're playing more back row oriented decks. You can hit things like Trident, and you can hit things like Zeus. Again, there's just so much you can hit. You know, Logia, Dolka. In Standby Phase, you hit things like Ultimate Tyranno. You're just trying to break your opponent's board so your plays can go through and you can win the game. Again, I see very few lists, or not even just like very few, but I don't see enough lists running very like, you know, go second cards in Ancient Gears when it's something you have to do. But Book of Moon is really cool over something like Lightning Storm because essentially it's going to do the same thing in a lot of scenarios. It's going to bait their 1 interact or bait a negate, right? But what's cool about this is if you are forced to go first because your opponent makes you, it has versatility in being a good card to set, right? It's just a very versatile card and something I really enjoy playing. And you can have cards on the field, right? So less restricted than Lightning Storm for sure, but if you want to play Lightning Storm because it can also pop back row, that is definitely a play. The thing about Book of Moon, again, over Lightning Storm, which I think I definitely should mention, because with just that explanation, people are going to be like, well, yeah, Lightning Storm's just 100% player, or 100% better, you must just be playing it because it's a budget option. No, again, with the way the deck works, which is summoning Chaos Ancient Gear Giant, which I will get to later, but here he is, you need your opponent to have a board. So you can't like pop all your opponent's monsters, because then you actually can't win as easily. You have to make Dugaris Chaos Ancient Gear Giant in that case. But if you're booking things to defense, then Chaos Ancient Gear Giant can actually pierce it. So this baits interacts and books things while also leaving them on board for Chaos Ancient Gear Giant to win the game. I feel like that's a better explanation than the half kind of just Book of Moon explanation I gave earlier, because that explains why to play Book of Moon over something like Lightning Storm. And then Harpy's Feather Duster. We got to play back row removal. This is actually a very trap-heavy format, which Ancient Gears usually fare decently against traps because they're either unaffected or your opponent can't activate them in the battle phase, etc. But Ice Dragon's Prison actually dominates this deck. Imperm can be very annoying as well. So we do need to play Feather Duster. And I'm choosing to play very powerful back row destruction instead of things like Cosmic Cyclone, which are better against things like Eldritch, because they need to be high impact because you just need to clear your opponent's back row and make sure you can go for game. And then that's it for spells onto traps. Very short and sweet. They are just break your opponent's board, essentially. We have 3 Infinite Impermanents, which is being cut from a lot of lists. Some people are not liking Imperm at all this format. However, I think you have to play it in Ancient Gears for its versatility in being, you know, a good draw as your 6th card. Its potential to stop VFD if your opponent either doesn't have Chuche and they're playing Virtual World, or the slew of rogue decks that can actually make VFD. So yeah, it's like, also it is just really good at baiting negates in the same way Book of Moon is, and versatile like Book of Moon, and where if you go first you can set it. It's just like too good not to run as a board break card, and I know it's not great in every matchup, but it is very, very powerful. And like, if you can stop things like Zexal and VFD, you need to, because otherwise you lose the game. So we're maximizing on our Gammas and our Imperms, which are like the best cards to stop those cards. And lastly, 1 Red Reboot being the 42nd card in the deck. This card, like Harpy's Feather Duster, is just back row removal, essentially, that is very, very high impact. You draw this and you activate against your opponent and you have full combo. It's usually just game, right? So Red Reboot, very powerful. Now on to Extra Deck. Because we are playing Pot of Extravagance, the Extra Deck is going to be, you know, a little awkward looking with the ratios, but it is, again, for Pot of Extravagance. So we're going to go with the 3 Ancient Gear Ballista. This is the card you just want to turbo out as fast as possible to extend. It can search Gear Town or Ancient Gear monsters on summon, which usually you're going to get Gear Town to activate it, and then activate his other very, very important effect to tribute a spell or trap card you control to make one of your opponent's monsters 0 attack and defense, which assists in OTKing as well as extending. So he just does everything the deck needs it to do. And we're maximizing it at 3 because we have to see it. despite running Extravagance. And then 2 Verte. Sometimes you need to see it, sometimes you don't. It's usually for extending into a second Chaos Ancient Gear Giant to ensure game. But in, worse hands or bad scenarios, you need it as your first Chaos Ancient Gear Giant. So we play 2 for Extravagance, but you only need to see 1 for sure. Then we play 1 Howitzer, 1 Ultimate Ancient Gear Giant, and 1 Megaton Golem. So these aren't Extravagance proof, and that's just because they're not as important. The most important one here is the Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem, because if like all 3 of your Chaos Giants get negated, or not negated, my bad, if they get banished off Extravagance, this is an alternate win condition because this Ballista and Dugaris is still game. 4,400 is actually huge. Megaton's just here for the Megaton into Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem into Ancient Gear Golem play. And then Howitzer like plays the role of a weird extender. Sometimes I have too many Ancient Gear monsters in hand and I don't have 4 in grave for Overload Fusion. So I have to like Ancient Gear Fusion into Howitzer, burn for 1,000, and then Overload with Verte by getting those 2 Ancient Gear monsters into the graveyard. So he's like a weird extender, and the burn 1k can be relevant, so I am choosing to play 1 Howitzer. If they get banished off Extravagance, no big deal. They aren't like your main lines of play, they're just other options. And then 3 Chaos Ancient Gear Giant. This is the man, the myth, the legend, the card you must hope that is in your extra deck after Extravagance. I've had all 3 banished like once or twice in about 100 or so games. Probably. I mean, I haven't been counting, but if I had to guess a number. And it absolutely sucks, but you can definitely still win with Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem and Dugaris, or your main deck beat sticks like Reactor Dragon. I beat like this Zoo Eldritch player with just Ancient Gear Golem and Reactor Dragon because these were banished off Extravagance, and it was really sad. His hand wasn't great, but it can be done essentially. You just want to see this guy, you want to attack all of your opponent's monsters, and you want to win the game. Then we have 1 Scrap Dragon, 1 Burrito. These are our Gamma targets. So again, I said Gamma plays the role of sort of an engine card, and it's because of these 2. Scrap Dragon can be made to pop your own Gear Town and blow up opponent's cards, and just amazing going second. And Burrito is actually an Earth Machine, so he can assist in making your Ballista if you have like no other way to get a second Earth Machine monster out there. So Gamma can be an engine card for either of these cards, and it makes Gamma's role in this deck much more than just a hand trap. And then 2 Dugaris, because sometimes he is pivotal for going for game. I had a list where I only played 1, but every time he got banished off Extravagance, I really wanted another, so I did bump him up to 2. He's the only XYZ we play because he's all you need. You just need to sometimes boost your Chaos Ancient Gear Giant to go for game. That's it for the extra deck. On to side deck. The side deck is really weird because you have to think so much about how this deck is going to go first when you're building it, because it just doesn't have a go first. This deck literally cannot go first, and the side deck sort of reflects that. 3 Droll and Lockbird. This is mandatory for Drytron. It's almost like an auto win button in a lot of situations, so you have to side this almost no matter what deck you're playing. And yeah, it's almost only for Drytron, but it's very good versus Shaddoll Invoked, or not Shaddoll Invoked, but just Invoked Dogmatica, and it's good versus Dinosaur. It's good versus a lot, but it's mostly for Drytron. And this is where the side deck gets really weird, and part of my go first philosophy. I'm going to show the next 9 cards all as go first stuff. So it's 3 Dogwood. This is going to seem really strange, but you just got to hear me out. And 3 Shared Ride. I'm going to explain these 2 together. Essentially, my plan for going first is to go second. And cards like Shared Ride and Dogwood can do that. So you set Shared Ride versus Drytron, you're obviously going to draw 6 or 7 cards, or they're going to stop. So if they stop, you're going to go second. If they make you draw 6 or 7 cards, you either already open Dogwood or you can draw into Dogwood, and you're pretty much guaranteed to live. And then you have so many cards, the goal is to break their board and win. Against Dinosaur, you side this in. Against like Invoke Dog, again, you're siding this in. Against like Striker, Salad. Against a lot of decks, you can side this in, and you can like get 2 or 3 free cards. Sometimes 1 to 3 free cards is a good assumption, or they're going to stop, which is even better. And if you have Dogwood along with this, or this draws into Dogwood, you almost like are guaranteed not to die, right? Which is very, very good. So the objective here is don't die going first, get to go second, win. That's the whole objective of this little package. It's really weird, but again, it has worked for me and I really enjoy it because it is a little different and kind of unique because, like, how do you side in Ancient Gears, right? It's not something you're used to thinking about, is siding in Ancient Gears. So I've gone for something a little more original and it has worked out for me so far. And then 3D barrier. This is again for the go first. It's one of the only cards I can think that's impactful enough that you can just set like one of it going first, stop your opponent's plays, and then get to go second without dying. It's good versus almost every single deck right now. And the objective is set it, use it, your opponent can't make their board, or at least their full board, they can't kill you, and then you go second and kill them. That is the entire goal. And lastly, we have some extra back row destruction, 2 Cosmic Cyclone for just the very heavy back row decks or Eldritch, and then a Twin Twister. We're playing a more diverse ratio here simply for the fact that Twin Twister has the ability to pop your own Gear Town in very weird hands. It is generally worse than Cosmic Cyclone, I'd say, this format, but for the ability to pop your own cards, I would rather play 2 in 1 than just 3 Cosmic Cyclone, right? So a little bit more diversity there just for the different scenarios and interactions. And that was the Ancient Gear list. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free to leave them down in the comments. I'll be sure to read them. And, you know, hopefully if you have any advice, maybe you don't like my list and you think it could be done better, leave those down there. I'd love to hear those as well and maybe take inspiration from your guys' ideas. But hopefully you guys enjoyed my list or think at least some of the decisions I made. Hopefully I explained them well enough that you can like accept them, I guess. But yeah. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed. Peace.